Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. I'm jumping right into the show because you've been talking all week. Senator Scott Sifton, the late-night negotiator extraordinaire. I think the state owes you a tip of the hat for avoiding a PQ. Tell me about the negotiations on the tort reform bill and what's in it.
Well, it was a late night in the Senate and an early morning, Tuesday and Wednesday, working on the venue and joinder bill. One of the unique circumstances was the fact that we had a Supreme Court decision less than 2 weeks before that had sort of completely recast the entire paradigm.
But I thought it would make it easier to pass the bill.
In a way, it sort of did. I mean, part of it is everybody in the process knew we had to find a way to get to something on this for 100 different reasons. And so we worked very hard all night long across the aisle. The floor leader, the sponsor, and one of the other attorney members of the majority caucus, and I sat at the table, and a lot of shuttle diplomacy, and just rolled up our sleeves and got it done.
So how is a Missouri, I mean, obviously it's going to be a little harder to sue companies, sue insurance companies. How does this actually affect them? And is there part of this bill that maybe reins in some practices that even as an attorney, it's a little hard to defend?
Well, we want to make sure that when people have disputes, they are resolved efficiently, and that we don't have more lawsuits in the world than we already have, or certainly than we need. The goal is to make the administration of justice as efficient as possible. Reasonable minds can disagree about how you do it. My concern was to make sure that for folks that believe they have been harmed by some of the products that are out there in the world, and a lot of these folks are cancer patients, want to make sure that they get their day in court and that they get a fair hearing.
So while I was sitting in the gallery watching, you'd come in periodically, but everybody knew you were negotiating this bill. You had some senators, Senator Brian Williams, Lauren Arthur, Carla May, the first time on the floor, holding the floor while you were negotiating. They did pretty well. 14 hours?
They did great. It was on both sides of the aisle. And frankly, we had members of the majority party helping to keep the ball in the air as well, especially later on in the debate.
Mike Searpoint and Bill White carried the ball the last couple hours. I thought that was interesting.
And it shows that when people are letting the process work, that bipartisan cooperation is and can be a thing in Jefferson City. Not what you see every day, but in moments like that, I think sometimes our better instincts really do come through. But it was great to see that the freshman Democrats in particular. I think it was a good experience for a lot of the new members of the Senate on both sides of the aisle to see how the process can work.
So tell me about what else. This is obviously an issue close to you. What else are you looking for this session, keeping an eye on?
I would still like to get a better school transfer law on the books while I remain in the Senate. We had some difficult experiences a few years back, with the Normandy School District almost going bankrupt because of the transfer law that we have, and we had some logistical challenges in other places. I'd still like to get that done, and I'm also still working to get some pro-law enforcement measures passed, cracking down on heroin and fentanyl. We live in an age where DNA evidence can do a lot of things to help us solve crimes. Sure. But we're not doing all we can, and I'd like to get some of those ideas across the finish line too.
All right, now let me ask you the real question people want to know. Now that you have this tort reform, the first one of these bills negotiated, the Democrats need a leader in the state party. Few tough election cycles. Many people are talking about you as somebody that could be the standard bearer for Missouri Democrats running for governor in 2020. Where are you at in the process on deciding if you're going to answer that call?
Well, focused on the legislative session while we've got that in front of us, but very much making plans and laying the foundation to move forward with the governor's race.
If you're a Democrat, though, really, if you look at general elections, you're the only person that's won a swing district in a general election in the last several cycles. You raise money. You're a Democrat that has been able to relate to cops and have their support. I think that's something that might transcend outside normal Democrat issues that people are thinking about right now. You've won swing districts in tough general election years. You're somebody that people would talk about. What does the process for you look like in making a decision?
Well, look, it's very clear that what Democrats have been doing in Missouri has not been working. We need a fresh approach, and there are some others that I think have found some success in some of these races. But I think part of the challenge for Democrats is they talk as if winning elections is what really matters. And to be sure, elections are very important, but we need to bring the focus back to what we're going to do for people. We've got to articulate a clear vision of how we move forward in a state that has a lot of wonderful opportunities in front of it, but also some challenges in the near future. And look, a lot of what needs to be done is just good old-fashioned careful managing of taxpayer dollars. We're going to have, I think, some real budgetary constraints in the coming years, but we've got to find a way amidst that to keep higher and post-secondary education affordable for families and for young people as they enter the workforce. And we've got to find a way to get Medicaid right. And I believe that part of that includes Medicaid expansion.
Is that the way forward? I mean, if you're a Democrat watching this show and you've put up signs, you've canvassed, went door to door, and you're maybe in eastern Jackson County and you're a little frustrated about the losses, what message do you give to them? How do you turn things around?
We need to talk about how to move the state forward, and we've got to articulate a better, more realistic vision for what the future needs to look like in our state than our friends across the aisle.
Governor Nixon, he knew a thing or two about getting votes. No Missourians ever got as many votes as Governor Nixon. And I always, when he talked to him, he talks about the value of work, putting the value back on Democrat Party and the value of your work and labor. And I think that is something that might connect on a level that maybe Democrats haven't connected recently.
And I think one of the biggest issues is better paying jobs for working families. And how do you get there? And we have, again, a lot of opportunities in that regard, but also some challenges just presented by the current economic state of affairs, which is great in many ways, but also presents some real challenges.
So when you look at obviously we used to be a state that would kind of buck national trends, and I'm not sure that's the case as much anymore, the way we've evolved, but now you have presidential contenders. It's really in the process. This isn't too early. Some folks have talked and announced and things. Is there a contender to you think, whether you're supporting them or not, would do well in Missouri? I'm
a Midwesterner, so I'm interested in Midwestern candidates. I have my eye on Amy Klobuchar. I also am hopeful that Kamala Harris can inspire people in a way that maybe not every candidate in the field can. I know a lot of Missourians are waiting to see what Joe Biden does as well, so it'll be interesting to see. And the Iowa caucuses are less than a year away at this point, and a lot's going to be going on not too far from here.
I'm just a simple hillbilly. But I think when you look at Donald Trump's appeal, which I realize not every media source believes that's real, but I think it's a very real appeal he has in this state, especially in places that used to vote Democrats, where he probably overperforms the most. I think Joe Biden would be the person who have the gravitas to, instead of being angry at Trump, kind of brush him aside. I think there's a style Joe Biden has that he can deliver a punch and you don't think he's a bad guy that might play well in the Midwest.
I agree with that. I think there's something to be said for Amy Klobuchar's pragmatism as well.
Sure.
In the case of Biden, I think the thing that if he runs, he needs to make sure he does is talk about what the next 4 to 8 years are going to look like, and not what we were doing a decade ago in a completely different set of circumstances. I mean, he has to talk about how we move forward and not just talk about where we came from during his tenure as vice president.
It would lead me to think that Missouri Democrats probably haven't done their job if you're not on a statewide ballot in 2020 somewhere. Would one of those presidential contenders showing well early influence that decision for you?
I plan to be part of moving our state forward regardless of what happens in the presidential nominating process. We're coming up on a time, and in part because of shifting demographics in the economy, where we're going to need some really strong management in state government, and I'm determined to be part of moving our state forward.
Well, Senator Sifton, the taxpayers got their dollars worth on your hour to hour this week. We thank you for adding a little bit to that schedule and joining us on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Always